find things and are clearly failing in doing so.
Steve, how does the manner in which the files have been released affected how President Trump is perceived in all of this? How is that affecting the actual president in perception where he's concerned?
Well, the president's approval numbers are in a state of collapse. He has an approval level in the 30s. We've seen the electoral implications for that in special elections from Mississippi to Pennsylvania, so on and so forth. The net effect of all of it is the release has confused the situation even more than it was confused about who did what. And one of the things that will not come out of 1 million files or 10 million more is some smoking gun piece of evidence that catches Ghislaine, Epstein, and Donald Trump in bed with one another. The simple truth of this is that Jeffrey Epstein was somebody that Donald Trump was very close to. They were best friends. And there is across American society at the elite level, top level, Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, presidents, potentates, billionaires. This was all cleaned up when they were with Jeffrey Epstein. They didn't see any of the girls. They didn't see any of the stuff on the walls. BS. Bill Gates is an example of somebody that fits in a cohort of people like, hey, I'm going to save the world. But he didn't have much interest, I suppose, in saving any of the girls that he saw walking around. If you're an adult male and you walk into a room, a house, a building, or whatever, and you see a guy who's in his 50s surrounded by teenagers, what does that tell you? There's no secrets here. There's no mystery. Power abused innocence. Law enforcement did not believe the innocent girls. They believed the powerful men. The corrupt federal prosecutor who got the lenient deal, exposing the rule of law, will know everything there is to know about Donald Trump and his relationship. It's a cop-out that, oh, maybe he didn't do it. Maybe something bad didn't happen. Nonsense. This is the most notorious child sex predator of the 21st century. His accomplice was moved to a minimum security prison after a social call by the Deputy Attorney General. We have an uneven justice system. What the release of the Epstein files has done is take a society that has no trust in any institution, in any leader, and make it worse.
Well, I want to ask,
who's out there?
Steve, thank you for that. I want to ask Christy about that notion of what the public knows and what's being released, because Congress is clearly taking an interest with this. Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey say that the releases so far fail to comply with the law that has been passed. Given that, if that is the case, Christy, what recourse do either of them have? Do the legislators who went forward to codify this or to pass this demand for the DOJ, what can they do?
Well, the first thing they should do is seek information about the basis for any redactions or documents that are being withheld. If it's victim information that would identify victims, there's no problem there. Everybody agrees that should be redacted from the files. But if they are asserting some kind of privilege, whether it is deliberative process, attorney work product, or attorney-client privilege, which the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche suggested that Donald Trump is asserting, when in fact I don't think that the client here is Donald Trump. He was Todd Blanche's client when he was his lawyer before he became president, but right now we, the people, are DOJ's client. So he has no basis to assert an attorney-client privilege over any materials. So they should find out why, what privileges are being asserted, what the basis is, and if there are any exceptions, identify them. And then I think there is a very strong argument under the Act that there is no permission for documents to be withheld on the basis of privileged information. That is what they are relying on, I imagine, to redact documents like prosecution memos, which SDNY prepared and there was a heading in one of those prosecution memos from November of 2020 when Donald Trump's DOJ was in office that said anticipated charges. And this was after Ghislaine Maxwell was already charged. So what that tells me is that SDNY was anticipating bringing charges against other co-conspirators. That is the likely inference from that. They were meeting with the Deputy Attorney General. If they had nothing there, they weren't looking at anybody else, there's no reason to bring this up to the Deputy Attorney General. So that whole memo is redacted other than saying anticipated charges and that a meeting with the Deputy Attorney General took place. That is exactly the kind of information that the American people want to see. If SDNY did want to bring charges against other people, who stopped it? Who was responsible for that decision? And what was the evidence that would have allowed them to bring such a case? Those kinds of things are what should be seen, and I don't think privileges apply. So that kind of isolation of what those privileges are, that should be determined in court. The congressional Republicans and Democrats that passed this bill, they should file a lawsuit asking a judge to compel this Department of Justice to produce any inappropriately withheld or redacted materials. The judge should rule on those privileges and exceptions and then issue an order that inappropriately redacted or withheld files must be produced. If the DOJ fails to comply, then they are in contempt of a court order and can be found in contempt of court. Any other avenue here doesn't really work because, sure, you could find them in contempt of Congress, but are they really going to put these guys in jail or detain them? No. And you can refer them for criminal prosecution to the DOJ, but the inmates are running the asylum, so that's not going to do any good. This has to be handled in court. That's what their next move should be.
Steve, I've got about 60 seconds left. I just want very quickly, can you explain why this story seems like it is breaking through for Republicans now?
Well, it's breaking through for Republicans because the Epstein conspiracy was at the root and branch of so much of the MAGA movement. The allegation was that there was an international conspiracy of pedophiles that were running the world. And at some crazy level, they don't seem to be so far off. I do want to say something because the last answer was a legal response to what's a political question. The contempt of court is meaningless, means nothing to this administration. Congress is a co-equal branch of government. The administration is not compliant with the law. Congress has inherent contempt authority in the Constitution. So it's great to say, well, just wave away. Congress won't use the authority because why? This next election, the platform of the Democratic Party must be to use the full power available to make what's happening, the abuse of power, stop. Congress has an
that becomes political only in that the dehumanification of people is the first step towards a whole lot of very, very bad things. And as long as you understand the basic humanity of somebody who is other, the whole dialogue winds up being in a much better place. So it has political implications, but it itself is not political.
Tell me about your own immigrant experience, because I do think what you just said is interesting because, every single day, not only are there the tourists here, but the people who come to Mass here, and they're all going out that way. Right. It may not be the front door, but they're all going out, they're all going to see it.
Right.
That's quite humbling.
It is. And my own family's experience is that my father came on a boat, like for real. One of the last people who actually came on a boat.
Through Ellis Island.
Yeah, just before it closed down. So so he came in the early 50s and his whole family came. And so They were all piled in a small sort of tenement building in Cambridge where I grew up before people got a little more prosperous. And I didn't even understand I was in America until I was about 5 years old, because all I heard was other languages and everything, and all the customs in the house were different, with the exception of my mother, who was vastly outnumbered by my father's family. But she, her family came mostly in the 1630s. North Shore, Massachusetts, Puritans.
Mayflowery types?
Yeah, Mayflowery types. Very stern Protestants, built this country and all that. And the lesson that I got from my mother, which stuck with me when I was making this painting, is that she was a teacher her whole life, but a very serious, like a double master's, and really thought about education. And when she retired, she spent all her time helping immigrants learn how to read English, helping them try to get jobs, how to try to get green cards. And somebody asked her once, she said, well, you could be in the DAR, you could be all these, and she was like, I don't want to do that. She said, these people are just like me. We're all immigrants here, if you're not Native American, and it's just like, there's no difference. And so that, she really saw it that way. And that vision of hers was something that I've always carried with me.
And that is really something we should all take to heart this festive season. That is also all we have time for. Don't forget, you can find all our shows online as podcasts at cnn.com/audio and on all other major platforms. I'm Christiane Amanpour in London. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next week.
Hello, thank you for spending part of your holiday weekend with us. I'm Danny Freeman in for Frederico Whitfield. We got a lot of news to get to today, and we begin here with Russia launching a large-scale attack across Kyiv that lasted nearly 10 hours, one of the longest of the year. Ukrainian officials say at least 2 people were killed and dozens were injured. Now, they also say the strikes knocked out heat to thousands of buildings in freezing temperatures. Russia's attack comes just a day before Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to meet with President Trump in Florida. The two leaders plan to discuss the 20-point peace plan that Ukraine unveiled this week following discussions with the U.S. Now, we have full coverage for you. We have CNN senior White House reporter Kevin Liptak. He's near Mar-a-Lago, and correspondent Nada Bashir in London. Kevin, I want to go to you first. Tell us, what do we know about this 20-point plan that's on the table for these talks?
Yeah, and this is essentially Zelensky's version of the multi-point plan that President Trump had put forward. You see the two sides kind of going back and forth, trying to come up with something that they can agree on. And what Zelensky's plan includes is immediate ceasefire. Of course, that has been his prerequisite for trying to get this war to an end. A legally binding agreement. It includes provisions that sort of mandate Ukraine's sovereignty. It talks about security guarantees that the U.S. and Europe would provide to ensure that Russia doesn't invade further once this war ends. And it includes some discussion of the territorial concessions. Now, when we talked to American officials a couple weeks ago, they said that they were about 90% there on this peace proposal. But of course, that 10% that is remaining is a difficult one, and it is a sticking point. And it's what the presidents will discuss when Zelensky comes down here to Palm Beach tomorrow. This meeting kind of came up last minute, and it's, I think, significant. It wasn't that long ago that President Trump said that he didn't think it would be useful for him to sit down with Zelensky unless he felt they were closer to reaching a peace agreement. And there has been significant work put in to try and get there, including down here in South Florida. The president's envoys, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, meeting with a Ukrainian delegation. They met with an envoy from Moscow to try and get all of this put together. President Trump, in an interview yesterday, was somewhat tepid about his expectations for this meeting with Zelensky, saying that he doesn't have anything until I approve it, referring to that peace plan, and we'll see what he's got. But he also says that he thinks it's going to be a good discussion, which in the end has not always been the case. You'll remember back in February, that explosive Oval Office discussion between the two presidents. And so quite a critical meeting, I think, set to take place here on Sunday. What isn't going to happen, of course, is any agreement from Moscow, because Vladimir Putin is not coming to Florida. He will not be over at Mar-a-Lago. And I think it still remains something of an outstanding question of what precisely Vladimir Putin is willing to agree to. So far, Russia has not backed off any of its maximalist demands for how this war will end, including that Ukraine